this video is going to be about philosophers versus warriors. This is so interesting. It's like a nice little dichotomy to think about philosophers versus warriors. Throughout our history, the history of the planet, here's like the history of the planet and etc. and stuff like that. You know, every civilization, there's always been like different types of social classes of groups of people, and there's been different like types of people and different social classes, etc. and stuff. I always found it very interesting. There was like always like in every society and civilization, there was like the intellectual class. How do you define this intellectual class? What the fuck does that mean, intellectual class? There's like a class of people, and they were like very intellectual, and they were like philosophers, and they were concerned about very intellectual things. Like they were like, maybe perhaps they were concerned about the societies, like our religion or etc. Or like the cosmos, or about like I don't know, like very intellectual things, like maybe like in terms of like history, maybe they were like concerned about recording it properly or something. There was like, you know, in like every type of civilization, there's always like a different types of classes of people and stuff. You know, India, this is so interesting. India, you have like the caste system basically, and there's like the Brahmins at the top, and then there's like everyone else at the bottom. There's like Kshatriyas, there's like warriors, there's like Dalits, people that are untouchable, and there's like this like very neat, nice little like caste system. Every civilization has something similar to this. Like every civilization, I do believe, has like something very like crudely resembling a caste system. Every civilization has like something like similar to like the caste system in India. Here in India. So every civilization, society has something very similar to the caste system that was like very predominant in the subcontinent India. There's like different classes of people. There's like, I do believe, in my opinion, there's like a philosopher, intellectual class, and there's like a warrior class. People like warriors. What is a warrior? Philosophers, because I'm making this video about like philosophers versus warriors. It's like a very interesting dichotomy to think about philosophers versus warriors. What is a warrior? A warrior is like a person that's only concerned about like pillaging, conquering, breaking things, doing all like the physical labor of things, like the physical labor, like wow, civilization, societies, they require warriors. Of course they do. The Ottoman Empire, the Janissaries, like every empire required like a class of people that were like grunts, and they did all like the physical labor and tasks and stuff, and they defended the territory of their country and civilization and empire, whatever. There's always like this. It's so interesting. There's like these types of classes, different types of social classes. Every civilization had like these types of different like sort of like caste systems. Really, every civilization had like a type of caste system. And anyway, I'm kind of going in circles, and I'm kind of like talking about things that aren't really even that relevant to this video. The topic of this video is about philosophers versus warriors. Every civilization since antiquity had like different classes of people. Specifically though, there was like an intellectual class, a class that was concerned about intellectual matters, things regarding the intellect, the brain, and things regarding like, and stuff. It's so interesting. There's always been like different classes in every society around the world, every civilization. There's always been like different classes of people and etc. It's so interesting to think about this, like regarding like philosophers versus warriors. I believe there's always been like regarding civilization, societies. There's always been like at the top, there's always been like intellectuals, philosophers, and at the bottom of like any type of society, there's been like the warriors, the people that were doing the grunt work, the people that were like pushing like all like the bound, like other people around, people that were like concerned about just warfare and violence and like protecting things and like breaking things and etc. So interesting, this type of dichotomy to think about this, philosophers versus warriors. What is a philosopher? Someone that's very intellectual, someone that's like probably not like physically well built, someone that's not really very physically capable. A philosopher is someone that's like not very physically capable, but more like mentally like concerned about things similar to that. I'm kind of like mumbling, but think about this very carefully. Every civilization, society has had like a class of people that were intellectuals, philosophers, and every civilization, society has had like a class of people that were like warriors, that did all the physical labor and tasks and stuff like that, and were in combat and wars with people and stuff. This is so interesting. This is so interesting. Philosophers versus warriors, so interesting. Every civilization, society has had like these types of specific groups of people regarding like in terms of like philosophers. Every civilization has had like a bunch of intellectuals at the top of their society, and at the bottom were like the warriors and people who did all the grunt work and laboring and all that type of stuff. So interesting to think about this. Philosophers versus warriors. Why am I even making this video? I'm just being a fucking retard talking about things randomly and not even like getting to the point. What's the point of this video? I just really want you to like consider it now and think about like philosophers versus warriors. who would be more relevant and important for us as civilization and society? Philosophers versus warriors. Don't want to see my face too darkened out. Maybe I should stand under the light. Philosophers versus warriors regarding like society, civilization, what would be more relevant and important? I do believe that what would be more relevant, that's why I'm making this type of video. What is more relevant? What is more important for a civilization and society regarding like philosophers versus warriors? What's more relevant and important? Is it the philosophers or is it the warriors? What's more important? What's more relevant? I believe philosophers versus warriors. I believe what's more relevant would be I do believe that perhaps maybe a civilization, a society, what would be more relevant? Philosophers, would a society, a civilization require philosophers more, or would it require warriors more? This is so interesting to think about. A civilization, what's more important for a civilization, a society? Is it like philosophers or is it warriors? Because you look at like so many different types of, there's like so many different empires in the Middle Ages, in the medieval period. There was like the Ottoman Empire, the Mughal Empire, all these other types of empires. And the Ottoman Empire is so interesting to focus on, because it was like the Ottoman Empire in terms regarding Islam was probably one of the most dominant like Islamic Muslim empires, civilizations that were made that revolved around Islam. The Ottoman Empire was so like very dominant, powerful, and etc. and stuff. But what happened to it? Why did the Ottoman Empire start to stagnate and fall behind Europe and like its competitors? Why is that? Because the Ottoman Empire was kind of like, it was like the Ottoman Empire, which was situated again in Turkey here. Philosophers versus warriors. The Ottoman Empire wasn't like, it was like built by it was like very like it was very military. It was very like the Ottoman Empire was very like tough against like it was like very what is the exact term I'm trying to find and use? The Ottoman Empire was like so like effective in the medieval period, the Middle Ages. The Ottoman Empire was very successful. It was like conquering a lot of Europe and the Middle East and North Africa and etc. I can keep going on and on. But what happened to the Ottoman Empire? Why did it stagnate? Why did Europe defeat the Ottomans in a lot of different times and stuff? Why did the Ottoman Empire inevitably just dissolve away and stuff? What was like the cause of that? And if you look at, and then it relates to this the topic of this video, philosophers versus warriors. This is so important. It relates to this to the topic of this video is because philosophers versus warriors. What would be more like what is like so important is what is like that, you know, your civilization, society, it has like philosophers versus warriors. You need like a society that has like intellectuals. Basically, that's so important. Philosophers versus warriors. So many like the Assyrians and stuff, maybe perhaps, were they concerned about like intellectualism and philosophy? I know the Greeks were very intellectual and philosophical and stuff, and that helped them, like the Seleucid and Alexander the Great, and it kind of helped the Greeks conquer all of like the Middle East, Persia for a very brief time. But you know, like philosophers versus warriors, what is more important? This is so, you have to think about this so carefully. Look at the Ottoman Empire. So it was like very dominant. It was like very dominant in terms of like European politics. But why did the Ottomans fade away into obscurity? Why did they like become irrelevant? I believe, honestly, I do believe it's because the Ottomans, they weren't very intellectual. They never prioritized philosophers. They never promoted any type of, perhaps I'm just being a dumbass. Like what the fuck do I know? A Pakistani guy talking about like the Ottoman Empire, the Turkish Empire. What the fuck do I know about that? But I do believe that philosophers versus warriors. I do. What is more important? That's the point of this video in regarding like civilization, society. Why is more important? Do you need like a skinny intellectual? Do you need like a big muscular tough guy? What would be more important? This is my opinion. I do believe regarding philosophers versus warriors. I believe philosophers are far more important for our civilization as society than like warriors, people that are just like that do all the physical laboring and the physical tasks and that engage in combat. These types of people, they're very much needed, but philosophers are far more important. Intellectuals are far more important. Look at like the advent of European colonialism. Why did the Europeans inevitably the Europeans, they kind of like they completely like overshadowed the Ottomans and the Middle Eastern, different types of Middle Eastern empires and Africans and all these other racial people groups. And why did the Europeans, they made it all the way to the top of the planet. They dominated this entire planet. Why is that? It's because Europe was like becoming very intellectual. I actually do believe that Europe has always been like very intellectual and philosophical. Like philosophy was literally born in Greece. There's like very intellectual, this intellectual activity of doing philosophy and etc. It was all like based in Greece. Europe has always been like a center for intellectual activities. But why is it that Europe, after like the Middle Ages, Europe really dominated the world's politics, and it still does. We are like literally, like Europe still does dominate the world's politics. Why is that? So I do believe it's because regarding like philosophers versus warriors, I believe the Ottoman Empire was like more concerned about like promoting people that were like good at combat, not really intellectualism at all. Maybe perhaps there were like observatories in the Ottoman Empire and etc. And stuff. Why am I even talking about the Ottoman Empire? Because it's so interesting to think about it. I don't really care too much about it. It's so good. It's like such an easy to use example regarding like civilization, societies. Look at the Ottoman Empire. They were so dominant in the Middle Ages and stuff, and now they're fucking like nobody gives a fuck about Turkey. Turkey's kind of like a shithole country. Actually, really, it is kind of like a shithole country. It's kind of very fucking it's kind of so it's so irrelevant. Turkey, nobody gives a fuck about Turkey. You know, Russia could fucking knock Turkey out forever. And Russia can literally break Turkey in half. I'm telling you, that's how weak Turkey is. You know, if the United States of America or if Russia or if any of the European countries wanted to like fucking conquer Turkey, they could do it in like a heartbeat. That's how weak the Turkey is as a country. Why is that? Is that because the Turkish people are just like, I don't know, maybe they were incompetent, I don't know, but what happened? The Ottoman Empire is so, like, you can kind of compare like the Ottoman Empire to Turkey. Turkey is like so shitty now. It's like, it's so irrelevant. Nobody gives a fuck about it, but the Ottoman Empire was like fucking changing, like it was so influential regarding like European politics. What happened? Philosophers versus warriors. I believe that intellectualism wasn't really promoted well in the Ottoman Empire. I do believe so. Not as much as in Europe. Europe has been like, there was like some type of intellectual boom, specifically during the Middle Ages, but even after that, in the Industrial Revolution, etc. That all propelled that all of these types of intellectual activities made Europe go ahead of everyone else. Then European colonialism started, and then the Europeans were taking over Africa and etc. and stuff. And they were like, so interesting to think about this. Why is that? Why did the Europeans dominate the world so quickly, especially after the medieval period? I know because again, during the medieval period, everyone was kind of like the Europeans and stuff. They were kind of like on the same playing field as like the Ottoman Turks and the Arabs and the Persians and the Indians and Pakistanis and stuff. We were all kind of like on the same playing field in the medieval period. But then after the medieval period, everything kind of changed. And now Europeans are like all the way up here. All the technological innovation, all the technology got built, the weapons, advanced nuclear missiles, all that stuff got made. And now Europe superseded all of the rest of the world. Europe is like, still today, Europe is still dominating, like Europe and like America, which is, America really is just like Europe 2.0, Europe 2.0, America, it's like an extension of Europe, and Australia's as well, all these other types of like colonies, countries that were like kind of colonized by the Europeans, they're like extensions of Europe. Why is that the Ottoman Turks, they could not continue dominating Europe? Why is it that the Europeans inevitably overshadowed the Ottoman Turks, and the Ottoman Empire just dissolved, and now Turkey is just like, it is a shithole country. I don't know, maybe you might find that very provocative. I do believe that Turkey is a shithole country. It's a very shitty country and stuff. I hate Turkey. I hate the Ottoman Empire. Why am I even talking about the Ottomans though? Because it's so important to think about this carefully. Like, the Ottoman Empire was dominating Europe in the medieval period, for sure. Like, the Greeks were completely subdued. So many different people in the Balkans were subdued by the Ottomans. The Ottoman Turks were like dominating Europe, and now now Turkey is just a shithole country that nobody gives a fuck about. It's like kind of like it's so tragic and sad to see like they lost their former glory. But why is that? Because why did Europe overshadow the Ottoman Empire, the Ottoman Turks? Why did Europe get so far ahead of all these other types of nations and people and races? I do believe it's because of intellectualism. Again, this perfectly relates to the topic of this video, philosophers versus warriors. What would be more important for a civilization, a society? Would it be the philosophers, the intellectuals, or would it be the warriors, the laborers, the people that do all the grunt work? Obviously, you need a combination of both, but quite frankly and honestly, I do believe it's like the philosophers and the intellectuals. Your civilization society, our civilization society, we need intellectuals. We need people to be like intellectual, to do intellectual things, to care about like philosophy and stuff, and to figure out like logical things and stuff, and to create innovation, technological innovation. All that type of stuff is like very important, very much needed. The Ottoman Empire, look at it. Why did the Europeans overshadow the Ottoman Empire? Why did the Ottoman Turks fall so far behind of Europe? Why did the Europeans so quickly and easily dominate the Ottoman Empire and the Ottoman Turks? It's so weird, because in the medieval period, in the Middle Ages, the Ottoman Turks were controlling everything perfectly in the Balkans and everywhere else, but over time, inevitably, the Europeans, they quickly, like, after the medieval period, the Ottoman Empire could have been so easily crushed. The Ottoman Turks got saved by the British, I do know that. The Ottoman Empire could have been fucking smashed to pieces. The Russians were really eyeing the Ottoman Empire, and they wanted to fucking destroy it forever. Why is that? Why did the Ottoman Turks fall so far behind of Europe, and and now Turkey is just a shithole country? Why is that? Philosophers versus warriors. This is like so important to think about. That a society, a civilization requires intellectuals. A society, a civilization requires philosophers. It's so important to think about this. Look at the Ottoman Empire. They were in the medieval period. The Ottomans were dominating the politics of Europe. They were like controlling the Balkans and all these other parts of the Middle East and North Africa. But now they're just like Turkey is just a shithole country. Nobody gives a fuck about Turkey. It's like maybe tourists, maybe for tourism and stuff. But really, I do consider Turkey to be a shithole country. I hate Turkey. I hate that country. I hate the Ottoman Empire. I don't know why I keep talking about it though. I hate that fucking civilization, but it's so important. It perfectly demonstrates like what I'm talking about in this video, because the Ottomans, they were dominating the politics of Europe, but now they're fucking stagnating. They're so far behind, and Turkey's just a shithole country now, and now like Europe is so far ahead. Why is that? Why did the Europeans become so like they went ahead of the Ottoman Turks? Why is that? Why did they? Inevitably the Europeans, the Ottoman Turks completely got, they clearly got shaken out of Europe. They got pushed out of Europe for sure, and now what's left of the Ottoman Empire is just like Turkey, which is just a shithole country. Why did the Ottoman Empire fall behind? Why did the Europeans supersede the Ottomans and defeat them and go so far ahead of them? And now, Turkey is just a shithole country that nobody cares about. So why is all of this? Because it relates to the topic of this video. The topic of this video is philosophers versus warriors. It's not just about like you obviously you need the laborers and the people, all the laborers, the people that do all the grunt work of your society. You do need a society, a civilization. You can't just have like intellectuals and philosophers, because what's gonna happen is like people, like all these people like you can't just have philosophers, intellectuals, people. There's gonna be all like, because your society is just gonna get fucking invaded by like people that are like very aggressive, violent, they don't give two fucks about intellectualism, and then your society, civilization is gonna fucking crumble to pieces, and that's fucking happened countless times. But intellectualism, it's not just like fucking, you need warriors. I do believe that's why the Ottoman Empire fell apart. Not just the Ottomans, the Mughals, all these other empires, these Turkic empires, Central Asian empires that were so dominant, they fell apart. Why is that? Because they weren't concerned about intellectualism. They only cared about, like, I think that's so interesting. These empires, like the Ottoman Empire was built by like Central Asian Turks. The Mughals were built by Central Asian Turks and Mongols. Look at the Mongolians as well. The Mongolians, they fucking were so like great. They fucking conquered so much of Asia and Europe and stuff. But why did the Mongolian Empire, why did they fucking die out? Why did they go away? It's because the Mongols, all they cared about was like using like the warriors. The Mongolian Empire was like, it was an empire built by warriors. The Mongolians, there was no intellectualism. There was no like philosophers. Obviously, there could have been like very like basic like philosophy, like some very crude like examples of like philosophers in the Mongol Empire. Like there could be like shamans and stuff like this, but not like proper philosophers like in Greece and Rome. That's why the Mongol Empire was built by warriors, but the Mongol Empire died out. Inevitably, the Mongolians, they just disappeared forever, and they became kind of irrelevant. Why is that? Because the Mongols, the Mongolian Empire was like a civilization, society that was like centered around warriors and people that were like good with horses and bows. It wasn't like there was no intellectual activity going on. The Ottoman Empire was kind of the Ottomans, because the Ottoman Turks, they do come from that same territory as the Mongols and the Mughals as well. These Central Asian nomads, why did their empires fucking go away? Now the Europeans are like at the top of everything. It's because of intellectualism. It's because the Ottoman Empire, they didn't like, the Ottoman, they had like observatories and stuff like that, and they had like libraries and perhaps whatever, but there was no real like profound intellectual activities going on. That's why the Ottoman Empire fucking died off. That's why the Europeans fucking skyrocketed forward. Like, what really made Europe go so far ahead of the Middle East and Asia and stuff is it is intellectualism. It was these intellectual inquiries and activities that really helped Europe like go forward and get ahead of the rest of the world, and then inevitably dominate the rest of the world. It is these intellectual activities, intellectualism, that's so important. The topic of this video is philosophers versus warriors. In my humble opinion, I believe that regarding civilization, society, is obviously you need people to do all the physical labor, the physical tasks of like controlling territory and dominating territory and keeping people at bay and etc. and stuff, and like fighting off like foreigners and stuff like that, and invaders and enemies. But quite frankly, philosophers, you need warriors for sure, but philosophers are just so much more important. I do believe that's why the Ottoman Empire fucking died off, because the Ottomans, there was no intellectualism going on, there was no intellectual activities, there was no technological innovation. What did the Ottomans invent in terms of like technology? Look at all this fucking shit. There's computers, PlayStation 5, PS5 games, TV, all of that, all our technology for the most part, it was kind of came out of Europe for the most part. I know like some parts of our technology, like algorithm, like a lot of our like math, in terms of like math, Hindu numerals, these are like from India, the numeral system that we use in the alphabet is from the Phoenicians, and etc. But in terms of like our technology, it's like a lot of it did come from Europe. And anyway, philosophers versus warriors, what's more important? I do believe philosophers are like so much more needed, much more needed than just like having like a lot of people that are like physically capable. Warriors are important, but I do believe that philosophers are just so much more needed. That's why the Ottomans died out, and that's why Europe went ahead of all the rest of the world, because Europe was like they were really promoting intellectualism. They were helping their intellectuals do their thing and become more like influential and stuff. And that's why Europe went ahead of the rest of the world. That's why the rest of the world's kind of like so far behind. It's regarding like civilization, society, philosophers versus warriors. Philosophers are so important. That's why the Ottomans, they became irrelevant, because the Europeans, they were very intellectual and they were creating new technologies, while the Ottomans were still living in the medieval period, using swords and bows, while the Europeans were inventing like guns and missile launchers, and now like you have like fucking these jets and stuff, and all these types of advanced pieces of technology that can like wipe everything out in a heartbeat, and nuclear missiles. I don't want this video to be too long. Philosophers versus warriors. Warriors are important, but I do believe that like every civilization, society needs to like have like philosophers and like promote intellectualism and have intellectuals do their thing and promote that. And I don't want this video to be too long. Philosophers versus warriors. Philosophers are so much more important.